This has never happened before. Half of Russia is without power. Key thermal power plants have been attacked. For the first time in history, the SBU blew up and shut down a Russian oil platform in the Caspian Sea. Zelensky announces a decisive week to end the war. Russia is ready to make concessions. Putin is building himself a luxurious mansion in North Korea. Is he really preparing a backup escape route? Denmark has recognized the US as a potential threat to national security, and Donald Trump is planning to split the European Union. Trump's team is talking about an alliance with Russia, China, India, and Japan instead of the G7. Johnny Depp, together with a Russian producer, has decided to film The Master and Margarita. Ballistic, a sensational investigation into corruption in the Trump administration. Snap elections in Ukraine. Trump wants to help Putin get rid of Zelensky. Hello, my name is Katerina Nesterenko, and right now let's talk about the main news. But first, please like this video and subscribe to our channel so we don't lose touch with you here on YouTube, across the vastness of YouTube. The day before, Putin's press secretary Dmitry Peskov stated that the Russian Federation does not accept any kind of energy truce, and they don't need one.
We are working towards peace, not a truce. A truly stable, genuinely guaranteed, enduring peace achieved through the signing of carefully considered documents is an utmost priority.
But as they say, the master is the boss, so let the Russians sit without electricity too. These are the shots of the strike on the thermal power plant in the Belgorod region, after which Russians experienced what a blackout is.
I'm going out for cigarettes. What the f? There's no power. No.
Oh my goodness, I cannot believe what is happening right now. This is truly unexpected and quite a shock to witness.
The same situation is happening in Voronezh. The city was left partially without electricity and heat.
People's windows were just shattered. Everything was destroyed. No?
It's scary, really scary.
A strike also hit the thermal power plant in the Smolensk region. But the explosion there terrorized the Dorogobuzhskaya power plant.
That was a pretty significantly big bang. Well, yeah, I definitely heard it.
Before this, it was quieter.
And
This power plant is not just any plant, as it supplies electricity to a facility that is very important for Russian industry. The namesake plant, Dorogobuzh.
The chemical complex Gabush produces ammonia, nitrates, and nitrogen fertilizers. These are basic components for the production of explosives, in particular, ammonium nitrate as a base for industrial explosives and nitrate mixtures for military needs. Without the power supply from the plant, their production stops, and it also provides stable energy to defense enterprises in the Smolensk region.
The plant was hit, and in Veliki Novgorod, a facility belonging to the chemical holding company Akron was also targeted, one of the largest suppliers of substances for the production of explosives in Russia. Drones also attacked the Moscow region. Explosions were heard in Zelenograd, Ramenskoye, Odintsovo, and Dubna. 4 of the capital's airports, Sheremetyevo, Domodedovo, Vnukovo, and Zhukovsky, were successively placed under restrictions. In general, drones were circling all over Russia. Due to the attack, more than 200 flights were cancelled or delayed at Moscow airports.
Flight operations will now resume promptly shortly after the temporary restrictions are officially lifted. So what are we supposed to do now?
wait for a representative. A representative will come. They are supposed to arrange accommodation for you. Of course, yes.
Beautiful.
Isn't it? You have to agree. Russia has lost another tanker from its shadow fleet. SBU's Sea Baby marine drones attacked the Russian tanker Dashin in the Black Sea.
The vessel, flying the flag of the Comoros Islands, was moving through Ukraine's exclusive economic zone toward the Novorossiysk port terminal. It was traveling at maximum speed with its transponder turned off, literally. As a result of the attack, the tanker sustained critical damage. The video shows powerful explosions near the stern. According to preliminary information, the vessel has been put out of commission.
Such a vessel is worth about $30 million. On a single voyage, the tanker transports petroleum products worth $60 million. But it's not just about the tankers. According to Ukrainian media citing their own sources, the SBU struck a Russian oil platform in the Caspian Sea with drones. As a result of the attack, oil and gas production from more than 20 wells.
According to our source, this platform belongs to the company Lukoil Nizhnevolzhkneft. This is the first strike by Ukraine on Russian infrastructure related to oil extraction in the Caspian Sea. As the source told us, the Filanovsky field is one of the largest discovered in Russia, located in the Russian sector of the Caspian. Its reserves amount to 129 million tons of oil and 30 billion cubic meters of gas.
We are waiting for details from the SBU. Reading the comments under previous episodes, I see that many of you are watching us from Kazakhstan, Moldova, Europe, and even the USA. We Ukrainians are very grateful for your support and proud to have such reasonable viewers. Let us know in the comments under this episode as well. Which country are you watching us from, and does your country support our fight against the empire of evil? I always enjoy reading your comments. And for now, we continue. Next comes the most interesting part. Already this week, there may be news about the end of the war in Ukraine.
This week could bring news for all of us and for ending the bloodshed. We proceed from the belief that there is no alternative to peace. And the key questions are how to force Russia to stop the killing and what exactly will deter Russia from a third invasion.
Ukraine and its partners, says Zelensky, are now actively working on a peace plan. In addition to the issue of ending the war, consultations are underway with partners on the process of Ukraine's recovery and economic development. In fact, Trump is also talking about the need to sign a peace agreement, though, of course, in his own style.
If you look at the poll, I would say that 82% of people are demanding an agreement be reached. I understand that they are losing thousands and thousands of people every week. They want this to end.
Where the figure of 82% comes from is hard to say, since Trump did not specify who exactly conducted this poll. Meanwhile, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov stated that Russia has submitted additional proposals to the United States regarding collective security guarantees.
We have indeed given our American colleagues additional comprehensive proposals concerning collective security guarantees. We fully understand that when discussing security guarantees, it is truly not enough to focus solely on Ukraine alone.
Of course, as is now customary, statements were made that Ukraine should once again become a non-aligned, neutral, and non-nuclear state.
The essence of these views is that Ukraine should return to the non-aligned, neutral, and non-nuclear foundations of its statehood. It was precisely these principles, non-alignment, neutrality, and non-nuclear status, that were enshrined in the Declaration of State Sovereignty of Ukraine on July 16, 1990. And it was from the principles proclaimed in this document that we recognized Ukraine's independence. So when we are now told, there's nothing we can do because our constitution states the goal of joining the North Atlantic Alliance, we recognize a different Ukraine.
If you look at the negotiation process on a broad scale, I have a strong sense that Ukraine and its partners are speaking with the Russians. They see a light at the end of the tunnel, while on the other side there are Russians who talk about Ukraine's neutrality and have no intention of leaving the occupied Ukrainian territories. Moreover, they also want the territories that are not yet occupied. We definitely did not expect such a turn of events. While everyone in Europe is trying to figure out how to deal with the threat from Russia, or at least to acknowledge that this threat exists, Denmark has gone further and, in addition to Russia, has identified another threat, albeit a potential one. Along with Russia, it has found another threat, even if only a potential one. So Denmark names the United States as a potential threat to national security. This is stated in a report by Danish intelligence.
The United States is increasingly putting its own interests first and now uses its economic and technological power as a tool of force, including against its allies and partners.
A significant factor in assessing the threat from the US was its heightened interest in Greenland, which, I remind you, is part of Denmark.
We need Greenland for national and even international security, and we are working with all involved parties to try to acquire it. And
a few more words about what the Danish intelligence report described as the US moving away from its partnership commitments. Global media have repeatedly reported that the US wants to withdraw from NATO. Trump himself has repeatedly hinted that European partners in the alliance would be left alone to face Russia. In this light, there is another piece of news. The publication Defense One writes that Trump planned to create a new alliance of world states and separate several countries from the EU.
The national security strategy proposes focusing U.S. relations with European countries on a few states with similar, likely right-wing radical current administrations and movements. Austria, Hungary, Italy, and Poland are listed among the countries with which the U.S. should cooperate more actively in order to separate them from the European Union. The strategy implies the creation of a core group of 5 countries. The Core 5, which will include the U.S., China, Russia, India, and Japan. A few countries with populations of over 100 million people.
Well, I can't say that's exactly unexpected. And what do you think about Denmark's stance towards the US and the threats? Share your thoughts in the comments. The EU may isolate Belgium just as it did Hungary, if the country does not support the reparations loan for Ukraine. Sources from Politico report that at the EU summit scheduled for December 18th, the main task for the bloc's leaders will be to convince Belgian Prime Minister Bart De Wever, who is vetoing efforts to provide Ukraine with a loan. Again, according to sources, if De Wever continues to block the plan by putting forward additional conditions and demands, he will find himself in an awkward and unusual position. He will be isolated and ignored, just like Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban.
The message to Belgium is that if it does not join the negotiations, its diplomats, ministers and leaders will lose their voice at the EU negotiating table.
Another option is that EU leaders could unite and approve the reparations loan through a vote by a majority, ignoring Belgium's refusal and simply pushing it through by force. But diplomats say that this option is not being seriously considered. Trump's corruption is worse than in Ukraine. The Atlantic writes that, despite the war, Ukrainian institutions are demonstrating the ability to fight corruption and cleanse the government, while American and Russian negotiators working on Trump's peace plan are looking for ways to strike deals that benefit themselves. In particular, as the publication writes, Kushner and Witkoff are using the tools of the American state to advance the business interests of their friends, effectively tailoring U.S. foreign policy to private deals. At the same time, Russian businessmen close to Putin were offering American companies multi-billion-dollar energy deals. In addition, The Atlantic writes that it is almost impossible to imagine the FBI conducting an investigation against someone in the White House, while in Ukraine, corruption is investigated by state institutions, ministers are interrogated, schemes are dismantled, and cases are presented publicly.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
Russian forces have advanced in Severesk, Mirnograd and near Pokrovsk. This is reported by analysts from the Deep State portal. The publication Ukrainska Pravda, citing sources located in the Pokrovsk direction, also writes that all exit routes from Mirnograd are in the grey zone.
The closed grey zone around Mirnograd depicted today by Deep State has in fact persisted for several weeks already. The last time we rotated people using vehicles was in mid-November. Then, in early December, a few people managed to get out on foot. That's all. In November, there was another attempt through Rodinsky, but all 3 vehicles, ours and those of our neighbors, were destroyed. Now I understand why Pokrovsk fell so quickly. Because the same thing is happening to us. There comes a moment of critical enemy buildup and that's it. They're everywhere and it's impossible to stop it. Because before that, they take out logistics, drones and pull back the artillery.
And a soldier with the call sign officer writes that the situation in Siversk is as unfavorable as it gets. The fighting for the city is in full swing. In addition, it was recently reported that the Russians have advanced in the Hulyapol direction, while in other directions, the enemy's attempts to break through remain unsuccessful. This is reported by analysts from the Institute for the Study of War. As we can see, despite the intensification of the negotiation process and the Kremlin's statements that Russia wants peace, Russia does not stop trying to seize as much Ukrainian territory as possible. which in fact says a lot about the sincerity of the Kremlin's peaceful intentions. As for me, I never cease to admire the courage and heroism of Ukrainian soldiers. They are holding the front and standing up to a huge horde that vastly outnumbers them. That's why I urge you to support the armed forces of Ukraine, and if you can't do so financially, write them words of encouragement in the comments. It seems Putin has found himself a backup airfield. In North Korea, elite mansions are being built that may be prepared for Putin. At the same time, work is underway nearby on a new cemetery and museum to honor DPRK soldiers who died in the war against Ukraine. All the details are coming up in the report.
In North Korea, in one of the most closed-off districts of Pyongyang, new buildings are rapidly rising. Officially, it is a guest complex for friendly delegations. However, according to journalists, this is exactly where a residence for Vladimir Putin may appear. The details of the project are being carefully concealed, but the scale is definitely not meant for ordinary guests.
We have never for a single moment questioned or harbored doubts that the leadership of North Korea takes its agreements with utmost seriousness.
It is reported that rapid construction has begun on 3 luxurious mansions within the complex known as Kumsusan. Each of these new buildings is about 13,000 square meters. Could it be that soon the sound will be heard here again? The arrival of the Russian delegation?
It's 1 o'clock at night, but in every window of every residential building, the lights are on. There are no dark apartments at all. Apparently, the residents received a special order from the local authorities. This is also how they are to welcome the Russian leader.
The construction at such a symbolic location is no coincidence. It is in this area that those whom the North Korean regime wants to show special favor to are received. If the Kremlin is looking for a new reliable partner on the world stage today, then Pyongyang seems ready to offer not only that support, but also a roof over their heads.
The relationship between our two countries has risen to a new high level of allied partnership. It has become possible to realize the grand vision of the leadership of both countries.
Ironically, right next to it, the North Korean authorities are also building a new cemetery and a memorial museum for those who died in the war in Ukraine. Such placement is a stark contrast. Luxurious palaces for allies stand side by side with symbols of war, sacrifice, and loss. In recent years, relations between Russia and North Korea have experienced a scenario rare in international politics. From limited diplomatic contact to a close alliance where words of friendship are backed by military and economic deals. Against the backdrop of the war against Ukraine, Moscow needs a partner willing to openly challenge the West, and North Korea is becoming that partner.
Just now, together with the President of the Russian Federation, Comrade Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin, we signed a treaty on comprehensive strategic partnership between the Democratic People's Republic of Korea and the Russian Federation, which will forever be recorded in the history of the development of friendly relations between the DPRK and the Russian Federation.
These are important events.
A special milestone in this history was marked by Putin's visit to Pyongyang last year. It was the first official visit in more than 2 decades. The North Korean leader welcomed him in the style of old newsreels, with parades, honor guards, and a display of missiles. All of it was meant to emphasize the historic moment. At that time, the two sides signed documents on strategic cooperation, which in effect formalized their alliance, creating a new political bloc. Since then, the exchange of gestures has only intensified. Pyongyang began to support Moscow more actively in its rhetoric, as well as supplying weapons that Russia uses on the front lines. In return, North Korea receives fuel, technical assistance, and the opportunity to expand its military programs under the cover of Russian support. The ideological component is no less important. Both countries strive to demonstrate their own path, where power belongs to a single person, dissent is suppressed, and the system revolves around the figure of a dictator.
This shows how much Russia now depends on other authoritarian powers and how it is violating the agreement. The UN Security Council does not support North Korea's missile and nuclear programs.
Against this backdrop, the construction of a residence in Pyongyang seems more like a logical step than an unexpected piece of news. The establishment of a permanent place for Russian delegations, and possibly even for extended visits by Putin himself, reinforces the impression that Moscow and Pyongyang are preparing for cooperation not just for a year or two, but for decades. The mansions in the center of North Korea's capital could become a kind of Russian home on the territory of a country that already lives in isolation, but is now increasingly opening its doors to Russian guests. Construction is ongoing, and satellite images show that the work is progressing quickly. Foundations have been laid, buildings are rising, and the area is expanding. North Korea is not accustomed to spending resources for no reason. If mansions of this scale are being built on one of Pyongyang's most closed-off sites, it means their role in the political future of the alliance has already been determined.
Donald Trump is once again sticking his nose where it's not wanted. This time, the American president has decided to speculate about the necessity of holding elections in Ukraine. In response, Zelensky said he was ready for this, but Europe was not. The European Union stated that Zelensky is a democratically elected and legitimate president. At the same time, our Western partners are convinced that new elections are only possible when the conditions of wartime allow it.
The 47th president of the superpower United States has once again been talking nonsense. In a new interview with Politico, Donald Trump not only surprised with his knowledge of geography, but also with his open indulgence of Russian demands. This is not the first time Trump has voiced the wish to hold presidential elections in Ukraine. Moreover, this issue was raised at the very beginning of the 45-minute interview.
Yes, I think so. A lot of time has passed and things are not going very well. Yes, I believe the time has come. I think now is an important moment to hold elections. They are using the war as an excuse not to hold elections. But I think the Ukrainian people should have that choice. And maybe Zelensky would win, I don't know who would come out on top. But they haven't had elections for a very long time. You know, they talk about democracy, but at some point it stops being a democracy.
In fact, analysts say that Donald Trump played into the hands of the Russian dictator Putin, who constantly accuses the Ukrainian authorities of being illegitimate. The Kremlin has repeatedly demanded that Kyiv hold elections, claiming that only then, according to Moscow, would there be someone to sign ceasefire documents with. At the moment, the Russians, through American envoys, are only pushing a capitulation plan. The question about elections caught Volodymyr Zelensky in the UK, between meetings with partners. The Ukrainian president admitted to journalists that he is ready to amend national legislation and hold elections during martial law in the country, on the condition that the Americans and Europeans provide the necessary security for this.
Why is Trump threatening us with elections but Putin is not? Again, we are ready for elections, so why should we be afraid of them? And you, Donald Trump, guarantee that not a single missile will land here. Can you guarantee that while the elections are taking place, no one will attack us? Or will 30,000 people have to sit in basements for a week or even 2 because Russia is shelling us? Look at the train station in Fastiv. The states say we held elections during the war. Well, yes, when the war was in Europe and Britain. On their own territory, when there was a war, the states never held any elections.
According to analysts, the issue of security is the most important one that the Ukrainian authorities should raise with their partners. In addition, how can transparency of the people's will be ensured not only under constant shelling, but also in conditions of power outages? In Europe, they were quick to remind Trump that he is forgetting the context, while in Brussels, they understand what Russia is doing right next to them.
We have already drawn attention to this issue because these are exceptional times. In my opinion, President Zelensky is a democratically elected leader, and any election should take place when the conditions allow for it.
Analysts note that for Donald Trump, this is the last real chance to jump on the bandwagon and force Kyiv to sign an agreement with Moscow.
Right now is the last moment when the entire active political class is on vacation, but starting in January they will enter a marathon race heading straight for the finish line in the fall. In other words, there won't really be any summer holidays. No one will have time for this. Ukraine only appears in the news somewhere between reports of someone being trampled in a supermarket on Black Friday and, say, the lighting of the Christmas tree at Rockefeller Center. Trump is trying to get the most out of December and prevent this topic from resurfacing in January when journalists and politicians return. And in January, Trump will start to be cornered into a course of action.
In fact, according to experts, Ukrainians need to hold out until the election race fully engulfs overseas politicians, and only then might issues of aid and a just peace find more support.
In Poland, at Ukraine's request, an employee of the Hermitage was detained. It is known that the head of the Department of Ancient Archaeology, Alexander Butyagin, has been detained. The archaeologist is accused of conducting illegal excavations in Crimea.
Kyiv has put the scholar on a wanted list. He is accused of conducting illegal archaeological research in annexed Crimea. Specifically, this concerns excavations at the site of the ancient city of Myrmekion in Kerch. According to the Ukrainian authorities, Butyagin is responsible for the destruction of Crimean cultural heritage sites.
Butyagin is currently in custody, and Ukraine intends to seek his extradition. A harsh retaliation against the enemy for strikes on Ukrainian soil. Zelensky has confirmed the combat use of Ukrainian Sapsan ballistic missiles. Let's not forget about the Flamingo either. More details on what and how the Ukrainian armed forces will strike at the rear of the Russian Federation. In our report,
Sapsan in action. The Ukrainian armed forces have begun using domestically produced ballistic missiles to strike the enemy. The exact specifications of the Sapsan missile are not disclosed, but its deployment by the Ukrainian military will allow them to strike enemy targets, possibly even more effectively than with ATACMS. Ukrainian missiles have twice the explosive power, fly faster, and have a greater range.
Of widespread and profound destruction, a devastating force that leaves behind a trail of ruin and desolation. This encompasses not only the physical obliteration of structures and landscapes, but also the shattering of lives, the erosion of communities, and the profound loss of hope. It represents an overwhelming and irreversible impact, fundamentally altering everything in its path and leaving an indelible mark of devastation. On the temporarily occupied territories of Ukraine, this is exclusively the sovereign right of the Ukrainian side itself.
In addition to Sapsan, the Ukrainian army is using several other domestically produced missiles against the aggressor country. This was stated by the president of Ukraine.
He says that the Ukrainian side, despite the intensity of strikes on the military-industrial complex enterprises, has managed not only to preserve its infrastructure of the military-industrial complex, but also to increase and scale up the production of its own strike weapons. This indicates the presence of qualified engineering personnel and sufficient funding for Ukrainian defense industry enterprises, which are capable of scaling up the production of Ukrainian-made strike weapons. Virtually all Ukrainian strike weapons consist exclusively of Ukrainian-made components.
Let us recall that in September of this year, Volodymyr Zelensky announced that Ukraine is actively developing long-range weaponry. He stated that the test was successful and the next stage is the launch of serial production. Earlier, Ukraine began production of the Flamingo cruise missiles with a range of up to 3,000 kilometers. On Friday, December 5th, the company Firepoint delivered another batch of cruise missiles to the Ukrainian military. Also in November, the armed forces of Ukraine attacked important targets on Russian territory. Long Neptune missiles were used for the strikes. Another of the most important developments has been drone missiles such as Polyanitsia, Peklo, Ruta, and Bars.
The Ukrainian side is ready to scale up and to use its own strike assets against targets on the territory of the Russian Federation. They were referring to the Sapsan and accordingly the Flamingo. In addition, Ukraine's defense forces have scaled up the production of strike drones with a target range of over 1,500 kilometers.
Ukrainian UAVs are successfully striking military targets in the Russian Federation, and oil refineries are also in the crosshairs of drone systems.
It was precisely the significant use of Ukrainian strike assets that truly and effectively allowed to block the operation of about 40% of Russian oil refineries. According to the Russian side itself, losses to the Russian budget are estimated at around $100 billion. But it should also be noted that the Ukrainian side does not intend to stop at these achievements.
Since the start of the full-scale war, Ukraine has ramped up weapons production and the implementation of new technologies which are already being used at the front. The volume of domestic weapons production has increased dozens of times. Thanks to private companies, Ukraine will be able to create innovations in the defense industry and effectively implement them on the battlefield.
Starting from the new year, the Ukrainian defense industry and the defense forces of Ukraine will receive Ukrainian ballistic missiles with a target range of about 800 kilometers. It should be noted that the manufacturing company, it announces the development of 2 ballistic missiles with a strike range of up to 200 and respectively up to 800 kilometers.
All this means that Ukrainian developers have demonstrated the ability to create high-precision weapons that destroy important enemy military targets at great depth.
Unfortunately, the bloody war unleashed by Russia against Ukraine does not affect Hollywood's curiosity about so-called Russian culture. Actress Reese Witherspoon is fascinated by Russian oligarchs and wrote a book in which she enthusiastically talked about Wagner founder Yevgeny Prigozhin. So actor Johnny Depp has come to glorify Mikhail Bulgakov? The Hollywood star is preparing a film adaptation of the novel The Master and Margarita. He plans to shoot it with Russian producers.
The project is said to be realized by Depp's production company In2 film in collaboration with Tribune Pictures and producers Svetlana Migunova-Dali and Grace Lowe, who previously worked with the actor on the 2023 historical drama Jeanne du Barry. Oysara Bay. The film was announced at the Red Sea International Film Festival in Saudi Arabia. The director of the film has not yet been confirmed, and casting details are still under wraps. Filming is scheduled to begin at the end of 2026. And
the only thing that makes me happy is that the rights to the adaptation haven't been obtained yet. I hope they never get them. What do you think of our news? Let us know what we should change to become better. We will definitely take it into account. In the meantime, give this video a like to support what we do. And be sure to subscribe to our channel Ukraine Today so you don't miss future episodes. See you soon!